Welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I am your host, Quan. I go by Q. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I'm discussing the topic of leadership. And leadership has been discussed several times. If you've watched any of the previous episodes between myself and Gabe in particular, but also previous episodes when they first started coming out, leadership kind of was the foundation or the core topic in which I was discussing. And I looked into it more, some of the videos I made, and I thought to myself, you know what, I want to go into kind of more in depth with leadership, and I want to kind of give more of a below the surface input to leadership rather than just a above the surface. Some cliche things are said about leadership and about leaders and what leaders look like. And then moving on and then saying like, boom, I did it, right? So like I wanted to go into more depth, especially for me and in particular about what leadership, especially biblical leadership, as well as leadership, if you're not, for those of who don't believe, right? But biblical leadership, but also other styles of leadership and expected leadership that I think that every man should follow. Now, I'm going to be biased, of course, and I'm going to tell you biblical leadership is the leadership in which every man should follow. But for those of you don't, and because for whatever reason, I pray that you come to Christ one day, and maybe this is the way, and this is a way in which you do. But that being said, I do want to give, I am going to give a diversity input of different leaderships in a leadership perspective. But I will, again, bias in there because I think all those other styles of leadership come right back to the core, the foundation where they all started, which is biblical leadership. And so let's get into this episode. And so let me first by starting off with a story, okay? And a personal story for me. Let's go back into, this is 2017. Yep, it's 2017. I was stationed at Fort Hood. I just PCS'd to Fort Huachuca in Arizona. Fort Hood's in Texas, if you don't know. It's Fort Cavazos now. Won't get into that. But I just PCS'd from Fort Hood to Fort Huachuca. And right before I PCS'd, I pinned on my stripes. I officially became an NCO. I was a corporal. But if you're in the Army, corporal is just kind of like a made up rank, if you will. But it's a reason for you to do staff duty, to be honest. But I was a corporal, and then I made sergeant, and then I PCS'd. So I was really excited, really eager to, take on that role of a leader and mentor younger soldiers. Whether that's they were specialist, or they were actually younger than me. And I was still relatively young, I was 22, 23, 22, I think I was 22, 23. I was 22, 23. And it was, like I said, I had all these grand ideas, and I was like, on how the type of leader I was going to be, because at the time I experienced just terrible leadership. I personally experienced some leadership in which I was like, I don't agree with, I don't understand, or whatever the case might be. And so I get there, and there's a soldier in particular, and I'm in processing, and everyone who I'm talking to, I'm stopping by at these different in processing stations within my new unit, and they're all telling me about this one soldier. And I was like, okay, I could either accept their opinions or what their experiences as truth and say, yep, based off their experiences and based off what they're telling me, this person is this type of way. Or I could take a step back, take in what they said, acknowledge what they said and their experiences, and say, okay, then, but let me see if my leadership style, or the leadership style in which I was truthfully trying to test and put into effect at the time, because I didn't have a style at the moment, is going to help for this soldier. And so I went in there, and those are my dogs again. I went in, and with this open mindset of just trying to be like, hey, I want to be open and transparent and just kind of figure out what's going on. So I meet the soldier, and right off the bat, there's this hint of I'll just be frank. There's a hint of disrespect, and it's coming from her, and I didn't understand. I was like, I don't understand. Like what, maybe again, I wanted to be, I wanted to be I wanted to be a nice guy, if you will, but I also wanted to be able to be stern, but I didn't know how to mesh the two. I only knew and experienced truthfully one or the other. I it was rarely ever opportunity where I understood saw the two meshed. And so I was like, all right, I could come off as like, hey, I'm a non-commissioned officer. You're going to stand up for arrest for me, blase, blase. But I was like, at the same time, that's going to set a precedent in which it's not an open relationship. We just met each other. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to almost act like it didn't exist. I didn't acknowledge it, if you will. So I just act like it didn't exist. And so I moved on from that, and our relationship in the first month improved. It was great. I was like, man, I don't know what all these people are talking about when they say this soldier is this soldier is that, this soldier's doing this soldier's done that. Like I didn't experience that. It's now 2018. Because I got there in November, and then and the first month or so of me actually being there was December. It's now 2018. It's February of 2018, and we have these height and weights in the Army that we have in the military. We have to do these height and weights, right? And I failed my height and weight, but she failed her height and weight as well. And this was a huge hit on me as a leader, right? And because one, I set the standard. I'm supposed to set the standard and then implement the standard and then help ensure the soldiers follow the standard and know the standard as well. But I wasn't doing it, right? I was overweight, and in Army standards, but in my own standards personally, I was still overweight. And I was like, all right, this cannot happen. This is not, no. So the moment it happened within the first month, I made the change. So like, it was February. It was the beginning of February. I got flagged for it, and then like February 26th or something, I was off the flag because I had told myself, I was like, this is unacceptable, especially as a leader and a new leader. I wanted to be a good one, and I put in the work to do that. But prior to that, we had to get flagged. Now, she did this thing where she decided that she was going to. There was an acting commander. He was a young lieutenant, and she had him sign a document, and he didn't know what he signed, but he was. I won't even get to it because whatever. I'm not going to get into the weeds of what actually happened because probably don't care. But anyway, long story short, she did something she shouldn't have, got in trouble for it, and next thing I know, it's about a month goes by, and I'm noticing this trend of like, I'm against her, and I couldn't believe it, right? Because like she had made the mistake, and I was like, yo, like, I don't understand, like, why am I your enemy right now? Like, I'm only here trying to like help you and ensure that the outcome is a viable outcome for you in your future, and it just seems like you're constantly against me. And she just kind of shut down. Now, kind of background on her, she at the time she was 28. She was 28, and she had 8 years in the Army. And here's 22, 23-year-old Sergeant Wilcox, who has, what was it, 13, 14, 15, 16, 5 years at that point, 5 years in the Army, right? So here's Sergeant Wilcox, 5 years in comparison to her 8. I'm a sergeant. She's a specialist. She's 28. I'm 22, 23 at this time. So of course she's just not receiving anything I say well, because she thinks, one, she has more experience and knowledge about the Army than I do in her own way, but it bothered her that I was in charge of her, and mainly because I was older than she was. And so, there was that dichotomy of that, of course. And then it very quickly came out about my past, meaning about, how I grew up, and she was a Black female. Everyone in my office was Black. And I've discussed this before about my past in my previous MOS, but they were Black. I was Black. but me being different from them, it was clear I was clearly different from them. And, it naturally came up. And for me, I'm an open book, if you will. And I had no issue saying like, yeah, I was adopted by a white family and whatever the case might be. Immediately when they heard that, there was a shift, and I was like, I was different. I wasn't one of them. And like, it just, that was one of the catalysts in which ruined our relationship, or it caused a divide, because there was a lot of assumptions made about each party. And so anyway, so we get to this point, she finds out she's pregnant, and, and it's like, all right, congratulations, but you're going through this Article 15 right now. And this has heavy potential impact on you. Like, let's figure these things out so we can, what's the best benefit for you. Long story short, it doesn't work out for her. We're standing in front of the commander and the first sergeant, and they have the second reading. It's kind of like a court, but like UCMJ style for Army. If you're in the military, you know what I'm talking about. And we're standing there in front of the commander and the first sergeant, and rather than just kind of be honest and be open about what happened and explain to them, why she did what she did, she lied. And so they called in the individual in particular in which she was lying about. And that individual was like, nope. And so then, all of his answers were right in front of her. And so they went right back to her and said, hey, did you do this? And she was like, nope, he's lying. And they're like, okay, we need to hear. So we go outside and I say, hey, listen, I need you to go back in there when they call us back in, and all I need you to do is apologize. I was like, just apologize, recognize and admit to what you did. And I was like, and then we can just move past this, right? Because I'm seeing the writing on the wall, of course, but I'm also seeing like, okay, they're trying to give you an opportunity here that I'm sure that you're not seeing right now, because you just, when a person's in trouble, but they're trying to give you an opportunity and you're not seeing that. You're just kind of taking this like they have it out for you. And she said her response to me was, no, I'm not going to do that. They've made up their mind already. And I was like, you don't know that. I was like, by them sending us out here and them deliberating on there, they have not made up their mind. They have not made up their mind. Because if they had made up their mind, we would have walked in there. They would have said, do you have anything to say? And then they would have sent us out the door and then came back in. We came back in and it's like, you're it. That's it. You're done. And I was like, no, they haven't made up their mind. I was like, go back in there and apologize. She refused to do this. And so we go back in there, and they said, hey, do you have anything you would like to say to us? Again, trying to give her this chance. And she says, no. And they said, all right, boom. And they immediately demoted her from specialist to private first class. And she was upset. She was crying. My senior NCO, that's a whole other story that I won't get into, but she wasn't there when she was said, and she was supposed to be there, but she wasn't there. So I was the stand-in. So I got the brute end of all of this negative feedback. I got it, right? And I remember later on talking to my first sergeant and saying, hey, like, if she would have just apologized, I was like, would the outcome have been the same? I was like, because she does believe that you guys had already made your decision up. And my first sergeant was very frank with me. She said, no. She's like, if she would have came in there and said she did what she did because she wanted to be with her husband, and this was a way to ensure she would be with her husband, she's like, I would have completely understand. I'm married. I understand what wanting to be with your spouse, and especially in the military when you're potentially going somewhere far away. I understand that. Like, I would, not saying I would do something illegal, but like, I understand why she did what she did. If she would have just said that and apologized, she's like, the outcome would have been different. And we would have definitely worked with her so we can get that for her. Right. But she didn't want to do that. And she said everybody was a bad guy. So I was like, dang, man, like, this was rough. So I tell that story, right? Because that was the first 6-7 months or so with me in this new unit as a sergeant, as a leader. And I'm telling you, I didn't know what to do. All of these things are new experiences. All these things are coming at, all these things I'm learning, all this, it's just completely new to me. And I didn't know what to do. And I remember just sitting there feeling so powerless, because I was like, man, like they don't teach you this. They don't train you for this, if you will. You know, like they like you just didn't feel like you're like getting prepared for this moment in particular. And so I remember just thinking like myself, like I never want to feel so powerless, in the sense of like my soldier has an issue and I don't know what to do. And that kind of brings me to where I am now, right? Where you can read all these books, you can read all these things about leadership, right? And truthfully, they have some effectiveness to them, and they help you kind of, you know, help you with small nuances of it. But honestly, you know, like it's about implementation and how you implement it in your personality. And that's one of the things I learned with is like I would either be too nice and, you know, let people walk all over me, or I would be too aggressive or too assertive, if you will, and people would not want to be around me. I learned for myself how to be in the middle, how that being in the middle, more of where I knew when to bring out the assertive side of me, and I knew when to reel it back in and say, kind of just be like, hey, man, I'm just chilling, man. Like I'm just having a good time, whatever the case might be. And I learned how that leadership style, one, it was great for me, because that's just kind of, it flowed into who I was as a person, but then as well as, it helped with my soldiers and that interaction I have with my soldiers. And so I want to start off by defining leadership. So I'm going to go to the Merriam-Webster, and where Merriam-Webster defines leadership as a noun, and it says it's the office or position of a leader. What is a leader, right? It says a leader is a person who leads, such as guide or conductor, right? And then kind of goes down, a person who directs a military force or unit, a person who has a commanding authority or influence. Influence is a big word in there. But that's what Webster defines leadership as. It's important to know, right? Maybe you don't care. Maybe everybody's like, I already knew what a leader was, right? Cool. No big deal. But I want to then now transition to, I was kind of doing some research, and something that came up that kind of caught my eye was this article about, you know, attributes of a biblical leader. And it lists several of them, and there's a few that stood out to me. And it starts off with visionary, and it says mission-minded, passionate, spirit-led, servant, focused, courageous, trusting, prepared, opportunistic. Now, there's the ones that stand out to me in particular on this list right here are servant, spirit-led, and passionate. No, I take that back. Not passionate. I'm gonna say mission-minded. So those three right there stand out to me, and why they stand out to me. Well, first let me go over it, right? Let's go over what mission-minded is, based off this description right here. It says an effective leader must be mission-minded. An effective leader must remain concerned with reaching non-believers. No matter what the ministry one is leading, it is imperative that the leader continues to reach out to those who need to know Jesus and receive his free gift of grace. And it references Matthew 28:19. And then for spirit-led, it says an effective leader must be spirit-led. The effective leader knows the ministry is a partnership between the leader and God. God gives us our part to do, and then he does his part. But we can never work alone or trust in our own power or abilities. An effective leader also knows that they must seek God first in all that they do, to make sure they are in the center of his will and purpose for their ministry. John 15:5. And then the last one, servant, is an effective leader must be a servant. As our Lord and Savior did not come to be served, but to serve. Matthew 20:28. We too must serve and not be served. This runs contrary to what the world teaches leaders to be. So a leader is called to serve his followers and not be served by them. Consequently, a servant leader helps his followers grow and succeed. So for me, those are what really stands out when it comes to leadership. And those three right there, this is a reference to being in pastoral role, but those three right there are three methods in which leadership for me and how I had grown my leadership and developed my leadership, not knowing without these official titles, if you will, on how they impacted my style of leadership. And the one that really, the two, so I do like mission, but the two that really are really big here, I would say even within those that I gave, are servant and spirit led. Servant leadership is you know, it even mentions, is contrary to what we as leaders are taught to do as being leaders, right? To serve those under us, if you will, our subordinates. And what I have found is, if I teach my my soldiers or whatever, right, that if I serve them in a way that, not in the sense of like, hey, tell me what to do, whatever the case might be, but in a way that where it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to check on you. I'm going to make sure you're good. I'm going to see what is it that you need from me so you can be effective, right? And when I do that, the feedback that I've gotten is outstanding, right? They receive it. They receive it a lot better, right? Rather than me coming in and saying, hey, you're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now there's an aspect there that I still do that, right? I come in for the day and I say, this is what we're going to be doing. But the big part is, I say, after I'm done, I say, okay, hey, what is it that you need from me so I can make sure that we can get this done? And we have that partnership and we work that out. Now, I'm telling you, I told you all these things. I'm saying all these bunch of things, and you're kind of like probably wondering like, okay, hey, mediocre dads, you know, what is the correlation here, right? So as a father, you have to be a servant leader to your kids. Now, parents, I'm sure dads, you're sitting here thinking like, how do I do that? How do we be servant leaders to our kids? And I can tell you guys, man, from the bottom of my heart, when it comes to servant leadership, and I know I'm kind of hyperfixated on here, but on servant leadership, but when it comes to servant leadership, and especially to our families, how hard is it to be ready to serve our families? Because I mean, as dads, that's one of the core things that we do. We serve our families. And so how hard is it for you, instead of sitting here saying hey, this is what dad wants, this is what dad does, this is what you're going to do, this is how dad wants, blah, blah, blah. Instead of going through all these nuances of those expectations, is how hard would it be to be like, hey, you know, what is it? What's you got? You know, you got A and B and C going on. Okay, hey, what do you need from dad? Okay, cool. And then boom, you're being that servant leader. You're helping them, you're serving them, making sure that they are taken care of, because when they're taken care of, that only benefits you as the father. And what I mean by that is, when they're taken care of, that in turn, that builds, and that trust builds, and all that comes together. And then from there, they're naturally doing what it is that you taught them, what you want them to do anyway. And it's crazy. I'm trying to you know, articulate, and I hope my message is really getting out there and you're receiving it well. But that type of leadership as a father, you know, we could come down and we can, you know, it's as expected all the time. We can come down here and lay down the law all the time. But after a while, that's the only thing in which how our kids are going to see us, is that we're here to administer discipline, and that's it. And after a while, they no longer come to us for other things in which they need and they want, because they say, okay, all dad's here to do is just lay down the law for me, and that's it. And it's like, no, that's part of being a dad, but that's not my main purpose as a dad. That's not what being a dad is. Dads are not here just to sit on the couch, scroll the TV, and then, hey, stop disrespecting your mom. Hey, go you're going to get a spanking. Hey, go to your room, go take out the trash. No, like, that's not what that's, you know, old school dad type things of there. But like, that's not what we are meant to as dads. We're here to better our kids, because our kids are the future. And I've said this several times before, our kids are the future. And it's so easy to just sit here and be like, hey, well, I'm going to start teaching them life lessons and all these things later on when they're older, when they can conceptualize these things and understand them. But no, start with them young. The foundation it's a foundation. God had talked about the Bible, the rock, we build upon that foundation, right? And so that foundation starts when they're young. And then they see that their dad is not only this person, this authoritarian who's out here ready to diminish discipline, but he's also here. He's loving, he's compassionate, he's caring. He makes sure that he provides for me and does all these things for me to ensure that when the time comes, I can always trust and rely on my dad. And I personally, kind of for me, one of the things that stood out to me for personally when I was growing up was my dad he flies planes. And I've said this again several times before if you've watched my previous episodes, but my dad flies planes and he was gone often. And I was playing basketball, my brother was playing football, and away games being where they were, and if he was home, whatever the case might be, he was tired or whatever. But it never failed. Every time I looked up into the stands, whether it was a home game, whether it was a away game, he didn't go to every single one, but the ones that he could go to, he was there. And though, have you seen those videos on Instagram or whatever, TikTok, whatever you guys have? And there's these videos of these kids standing on the stage, and they're upset, they're just kind of nervous. And then they make eye contact with their parents, right? I imagine their dad, because I'm a dad. They make eye contact with their dad, and their face just lights up, and then they're just like, "Oh yes, they came here, they saw me, they've seen me. I feel seen, I feel loved, and they're there." And that's what it was for me. Is my dad showed up. He showed up, and from that moment on, like it didn't matter anything else. I just knew subconsciously the lesson that the teaching was presence, and the presence of just being there and just being like, "Hey, I'm here to support you. Whether you play in the game, whether you don't play the game, whether you miss every single shot or you make a bunch of shots, whatever it is, I'm here to support you." And that just meant so much to me, and in the impact that it had, because my dad was always there. And that is one of those things for me where it comes to being a leader within your home, that if I could take away a key takeaway here, is just presence. Is your presence means so much to your kids, and your kids will love when dad comes around. I don't know what each and everyone's home is, but I can tell you in my home, if when I come home and I've had a long day and all the girls are home before I am, I know I can walk in the door and one or two things are happening. Either they're standing out behind the laundry room door waiting for me to open the door, and both of them are like, "Daddy, Dada," and they're just super excited, and a smile lights up their face, and it brings so much joy because I'm like, oh, they waited for me. Like, I'm not even that important, Sometimes I don't feel that important, but they were so excited to see me, and that joy on their faces, and I give them a big hug, and I just like, "I love you guys so much." Like, hey, and I remember just doing the same thing to my dad when he would come home, when we knew he was coming home from long trips, and we'd kind of sit there and wait, like, "Dad, Mom, say you're home," and he's like, "Hey guys," give us a hug, give us a kiss, and we're like, "All right, don't touch me. All right, that's enough. That's the emotional thing." And my oldest does that to me now, where she's like, "Oh, okay, you got." I was excited to see you. I didn't. The hug was not part of the deal, and so, just that joy and excitement that I had because he was home, and get in trouble, not in trouble, whatever. But it just knew, like, I was like, my dad was home, and it felt good. And so, like, that warmth, everything was going to be okay. He came home, it felt like everything was going to be okay. And I hope that's kind of what my kids are experiencing, where it's like, hey, dad's home, everything's going to be okay. It's not to say mom was like, things were going to shit when mom was home. No, it's just to say, like, dad's home. It's a sense of it's like a security blanket where you're just like, I don't know what it is. I just feel comfortable. I feel taken care of. I feel like nothing could go wrong right now. And if it did, dad's here and he's got it. He's going to take care of us. And so that leadership, that form of leadership right there, or presence, because in the Army, we talk about presence all the time, but leadership for me, the biblical ones are the core, the foundation of it. Right. But the presence is one of those biggest, the key ones for me, because if you think about the Bible, think about to the moment where you're in the Bible where, even in Psalms where some of the Psalms, David is crying out to the Lord, like, Lord, why have you abandoned me? Why have you forgotten me? Where are you, Lord? Where are you? And then the very next one, he talks about how I thought I was alone, but you were there the entire time. Right. And the Lord's presence was there. We just had to have an open heart to want to connect with him. And it's so amazing to me because there are times like I do feel like I'm like, oh man, I don't feel the Holy Spirit in me. I feel like I'm alone. Like I just kind of like, I don't know. Like I don't have the feeling, you know what I mean? Like I don't have it. It's gone. Like, so is there, am I like, is he here? Where is he at? He says he's always there. He's always with us. He'll never forsake us. And I start thinking to myself like, okay, hold on. Start praying for a second. I'm like, hold on. Oh, there he is. And it's a little feeling for me. It's just like, and this might sound cheesy for you guys, but I don't care. Right. But there's this little feeling, that makes me feel that I know that the Lord is there and he's present with me all the time. And that feeling reminds me that I'm not alone. I'm never alone. And that same feeling is a feeling that when my dad walked through the door or talk to him on the phone, let me know that my dad is here. He's not going to leave me. His presence is what mattered the most. And your presence is mandatory. And again, coming back full circle, as a leader, presence means a whole lot. As a leader, if I walk into a room and I know this because my soldiers make fun of me. So like I'm a broad-shouldered dude. I'm pretty broad-shouldered, big-chested, not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty statured dude. And I walk into a room and immediately there's a demeanor change. And not necessarily like oh shoot, like he's here, we got to be on our P's and Q's, you know what I'm saying? But like he's here. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but like there's a demeanor change. It's kind of like if Sergeant Major walks in and everyone's like, oh shit, Sergeant Major's here. Hey, we weren't doing anything wrong, but like, hey, he's here, right? When your dad walks into the room, if you're hanging out with your friends and your dad walks in, everyone's kind of like, hey, we're not doing anything wrong, but like, just in case something comes out the window, it's like, we're not doing anything wrong. I don't know what it was. It's one of those moments. And I didn't learn that. That tactic, if you will, until I became a dad. I don't have to say anything. You don't say anything. You just kind of walk in. You don't say anything, but you're not like angry. You're just kind of like normal face. Say, hey, everybody's going, it's smiling. It's smiling throws them off completely. But then, hey, how's everyone going? And it immediately kind of puts in there like, okay, he's here, right? And we need that. All right. Form of respect, whatever. P's and Q's, we need to be on it, right? And that's what presence does. And as leaders, if we have that, if we have presence within our home, we have presence within our profession, man, it changes things. But don't forget now the leadership that comes in here from the biblical leadership in which the Bible talks about. And I'm pointing at my computer because it's right here. You can't see it, but it's right here, I promise. And when it talks about servant, when it talks about spirit-led, and when it talks about mission-minded, and I'll provide the link in the bottom so you can read all of this. I won't go through all of it, but I'm telling you, it's all, presence comes into all of these, right? So without presence, I don't think some of these could be really effective. But again, when it comes to biblical leadership, it's not your presence alone that matters. It's God's presence. And when you have God's presence and your presence together, oh man, it's something different. Can't be stopped. And it's a feeling of like, I can do anything. For real, it's a feeling of I can do anything. So as a dad, I literally, when I because I get deeper and deeper into the word every single day, building on my spiritual life and personally and with my family. I can tell you that feeling that I have walking with the Lord and the presence I have with, forget me, but that with him, I feel like I said, it's the word impossible is a man-made word. We made it up. We did. Not him. We did. Because impossible doesn't refer to him. It refers to the limitations on us. And it's so powerful. Man, I'm sorry. I had a moment. I was having a moment there, but anyway, guys, leadership, you have to find your niche when it comes to being a leader. You can apply, for those of you in the military, you're not in the military, you're in whatever profession you're in, you can try to apply that leadership style which you see your boss do, and it may not work for you, or it may not, or it may actually work for you. But what I found personally, it didn't work for me. Excuse me. It wasn't working for me. And so I had to find my own way in that leadership, in my leadership style in the military, and then at home, especially at home. I thought if I applied the leadership style that I had at work, that I come home, especially with the wife and the kids, everything would run smoothly. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Got the taste slapped out of my mouth. Not really in reality, but like it was a reality check, if you will. And so I learned that the father that I want to be is the leader that I want, that I can be within, at home and at work. I can mesh the two, and they don't have to be different. I don't have to be two different people. I don't feel like I'm a fraud at home or a fraud at work. I'm Quan all the time. And through the lessons that I've learned, the teachings I have I've learned through the Bible, and the teaching that I got from my dad, and the teachings that I've got based off my experiences in the military, all come together to allow me to become the leader that I am within, especially in particular in my home. And I'm not perfect. Again, this is why I have mediocre dads. Being mediocre is a choice. Refuse to be mediocre. And I have to refuse to be mediocre every day. And so I can wake up and be like, oh, I'm just going to sit on my phone, let them play, tell them to leave me alone. Or I can be involved, presence, and really impact their lives and refuse to be mediocre, refuse the mediocrity that comes with it. Sometimes we just sitting within our homes, whatever the case might be, right? Refuse to be mediocre. I'm telling you guys, refuse to be mediocre. Okay. That's all I got. Again, I'm Q with Mediocre Dads. Being mediocre is a choice. Refuse to be mediocre. Mediocre Dads out.